Home to the first moving picture film shoot in the world, pioneering scientific research into DNA, as well as the world's first internet service provider, it would be fair to say Leeds boasts an impressive history. Known for its legendary textiles industry back in the 1900s, Leeds has continued to develop and grow. Now home to 250,000 residents, the city is the third largest in the UK.
William Hill,
Jet2,
BBC,
David Attenborough,
Ladbrokes,
Asda,
Thames TV,
Downton Abbey.
With a bias towards London in the south and Manchester in the north, our national media gives little detail into the growth of the creative sectors within Leeds.
I do really like Leeds as a city. I'm originally from Bradford, so I was born not too far away, and I do have some sort of roots and connection with West Yorkshire. It's got a lot of range of things you can do. So as a place to live, it's convenient for all sorts of stuff.
The city is uber vibrant. The new John Lewis opening this year, more jobs, more restaurants, more bars, more cool places to go, more gig venues, get to see more musicians, more bands. Everything's going Leeds' way.
Leeds as a creative scene is a fantastic city to be in. It always has been, and it's getting better at the moment. It's a great time to be working in a creative sector in Leeds. Leeds came from manufacturing backgrounds, which is a good strong standing in making something coming from Leeds, and huge financial outfits in Leeds made money coming to Leeds, and those have been great building blocks to put more and more output through from Leeds.
I think that Leeds is one of the most creative cities I've ever spent time in, and I've spent time in a few, but I spend a lot of time in London, and Leeds is increasingly feeling a lot more like London does. I think that generally speaking, the creative scene in Leeds is growing and growing massively. You've got some enormous kind of things happening throughout the city.
I think the scene is great. I think it's vibrant, I think it's fresh, but then also I think that it's the same in just about any other city that's outside of London. It's just the way our popular culture is built, the focus is always going to be on London, and anywhere else is going to feel like it's less significant.
Home to some of the world's most established agencies and production companies, servicing everything from YouTube to feature films, London has long led the way in the UK creative scene. With continued growth across London, rent for residential as well as commercial space has risen drastically, so much so that startups as well as larger companies have begun to look elsewhere.
Rent in central Soho is like $100,000 a year. It can be really, really expensive down there very, very quickly. In order to turn over the amount of money that you need in central London to just exist as a business, I think it forces you down a route as opposed to kind of having all the options open to you. Whereas up here, it kind of feels like we can do what we want to do, really.
The cost of property rent is a lot lower than London, and ultimately is a decider for me to stay in Leeds and not move to London or Manchester, which means I can invest more in my equipment. I can keep up to date with the technology.
The technical ability and the talent available in Leeds is second to none. And people move out from London to be in Leeds, as well as people moving from Leeds to be in London to work. It's an open door, people move around, so the talent isn't restricted geographically.
Because we're on the bespoke side, which is really the distinction that we kind of make, we don't really do any sync stuff with bands, or we don't really do any kind of pre-existing music to film kind of work. It's all based on sort of briefs that we get given that we then write for. I think it's harder to do that, just solely do that if you're based in London.
The brands that carry the work into London, as we've seen with some of the huge brands doing work in that London, sometimes allows a little more budget, a little more time and a little more experienced people to work on their jobs within those brands and maybe get to show off more, maybe get to show your talent an awful lot more, with the budgets allowing you those days of prep and allowing you that play time within your job. I think sometimes restrictions up here on budget seem to see a job wanting to be completed in a timely fashion, and to be out of the door. There are jobs that allow you the time to experiment more with them, to find better ways of doing certain things. And they're great fun to work on. And with good creative directors and good directors on projects, they'll allow you to do that, and not only allow you, want you to give everything you've got into a job, which are the great jobs to work on.
Manchester has lots of stuff going on, and it is a bigger city, but it also feels a bit tougher, I think, and perhaps not quite as friendly. Leeds seems a bit more connected. It's a little bit smaller. It's got a bit more of a friendly atmosphere, attitude. But I think you've got to be careful to make generalisations about places, because they change over time, and people are what make places what they are as well. So you can get exceptions.
With the UK government promoting the Northern Powerhouse, questions have been raised as to exactly which cities are included and what the powerhouse is. With the introduction of Media City in Manchester, the UK creative scene has kept a very close eye on its progress. With facilities covering 200 acres and a substantial list of high-profile tenants, the development has brought large financial investment to the area.
When Media City was spoken about in Manchester, it came along on Peel Holdings, and I know Sumner's chief exec was involved in bringing this whole Media City thing to life. And then getting the BBC in as a tenant for them, I think, was a fantastic acquisition for them, and really gave that whole area a trusted logo above the door to say, look, the media industry has brought this great name to Manchester.
I think Media City going there was a massive deal. I think in terms of studio space and stuff like that for shoots, they have more options over there. There's more production companies over there. I think we've got stronger post-productions over here, in VTR North, for example, who I use all the time. But there seems to be more choice over there to work with different people, keep it mixed up in terms of who you're using, and get a different look and feel. And also, the amount of directors they have on our rosters over there, for example, is far greater than what you find over here. In fact, there's not really a production company over here anymore who I would put anything more than a 25 grand job through, to be honest, on production.
If you're based in London and the power centre's in London, they're going to be reluctant to give any of it away. So they're going to feel like, well, we've already given away some of our power to Salford, therefore we're not going to focus our attention on any other cities. I think that could be a problem. I worry about that, because I think why not have more than two cities which actually have an influence on what goes on in our society? Why does it just have to be London and Manchester, say?
Personally, within VTR North, we have worked for the BBC before they came to Manchester. We remain working for the BBC on certain projects throughout them being in Manchester. Has it brought a great influx of work over here as soon as the door opened? No, it hasn't. Will that change? Potentially. Who knows? Who knows what the next thing is? I know the BBC keep a lot of work within the BBC without farming it out to other industries, but if it promotes the North as a media and creative area, then it gets 100% support. I think it's fantastic.
Leeds is kind of just about the right size, I think, for certainly DIY types of work, and also slightly larger scale projects too. What it lacks in size, it makes up for in this kind of vibrancy of activity. And if you compare it to somewhere like Manchester, which has got a lot of investment behind it, which is kind of up and coming, is much harder to get space in Manchester. It's much more expensive. It's very, very difficult to get things like support in kind for projects when you compare it with a place like Leeds. So a lot of people that I know who are working in Manchester at the moment are struggling to an extent to get spaces to produce projects. Whereas if you take Leeds, it's much easier to get into that scene. And that's not because it's less competitive, that's not because the quality is lower, it's because Manchester is being moved into by larger companies who are obviously going to be driving up the price and making it more difficult for independents to make a living.
I don't think Leeds has as strong an identity as Manchester does as a city. You know, they do a lot of brand building themselves, which with the Isle of Manchester and things like that, which Leeds doesn't seem to have. I also think Leeds needs to have a very strong football team, because I hate Leeds United, but I think it makes a massive difference to the vibe of a city if they've got a successful team sometimes, which is why Manchester's got a great vibe about it. I think Leeds could do a lot more with its own identity, a la Manchester, I think, and I think that would help.